I would like to welcome you and thank you for coming to our podcast, for accepting the invitation. If you could introduce yourself and tell our audience a bit more about who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. So, Cuba, yeah. Well, firstly, thanks very much for the invitation. It's always great to have these discussions, especially with people who are very well versed in the electromobility space, and you're certainly one of those. And yeah, I'm looking forward to today. In terms of who I am and my background, I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. So, and yeah, I studied aerospace systems engineering in the UK, but as things have it, I never really pursued a career in aerospace engineering. This was in the 90s, interestingly, when there wasn't a SpaceX, and intuitively, I felt it wouldn't be a good idea to go into aerospace engineering simply because of the conservative nature
Yeah,
of those companies, right? Like you'd spend the first 3 years of your life designing rivets type thing, in a
it
very
was not so
authoritarian type
exciting back
structure.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's certainly sort of proven that. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why SpaceX has been so successful, because they've just give everyone a lot more responsibility starting from the interns. Um, and so I never went down that route. I worked in strategy consulting with a company called Monitor here in South Africa initially, then in Boston, and Canada, and then ultimately my last stint was in Europe, in Sweden specifically. I spent most of my time consulting to a financial services company there. And after that, I started the company I'm with now, which is BSC, Business Science Corporation, and we're fundamentally centered around technology and analytics, right? Sort of riding the fourth industrial revolution wave, providing technology and data analytics services. It's why our two companies know each other. You guys have been great partners in assisting us in certain situations, and yeah, we've been around for 23 years now, so it's not like we've jumped on the recent fad. It's something that's helping companies make better decisions through data and technology has been at the core of what we've done since inception. Um, so that's a brief summary. I've certainly developed an interest in electromobility and Tesla probably since 2013. Started following Tesla very closely. Obviously, I knew Elon Musk, or of Elon Musk, since the SpaceX, the PayPal and SpaceX days. Um, but I got a particular interest, and yeah, ironically, even being an aerospace engineer, like the idea of going to Mars and everything that Musk is driving is interesting, but it doesn't deeply resonate with me. But the the work and the initiatives around transitioning the world's to sustainable energy, especially through electric mobility, is something that deeply resonates, right? And I'm far more excited about what Tesla's doing than anything else, right? So I love the products. Here in South Africa, we don't have Tesla vehicles. So I have been driving an i3 or it was actually for 8 years since it pretty much first launched, and recently moved to a Volvo XC40, the fully electric. But I do have a Tesla Powerwall because they are here. And yeah, it's a space I'm deeply passionate about. And yeah, very grateful to be part of a community that has an interest in that.
okay, well, one interesting bit regarding Tesla availability in Poland versus South Africa. It's completely reverse. So we have no power walls, even though I would like to get one, but we have the cars. So I've been lucky enough to be able to drive a
Yeah.
Tesla car for the
Yeah.
past 2 years and a half, and it's
If I could
amazing.
swap it, I would swap. Yeah, I think you have
Yeah,
the better end of that trade-off.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I have some questions for you, but first of all, from your introduction, an idea came to my mind to ask you, because you're also a software company, basically. Do you have any plans? Have you done any research? And did you think about jumping into the EV space or the broader electromobility space with your offering? And
Yeah.
if so, what are your ideas in that area?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, in our instance, it's not high on our priority list per se, simply because of the market positioning of where we are here. I mean, we are South African based. We do have a global presence, but we tend to serve more enterprise customers in financial services and retail. And so in healthcare, as of late, we've been doing great strides there. So to be honest, we need to put our efforts. There's so much potential, untapped potential that we have access to in those areas. So it's not the most prudent for us to expand more laterally in this case. At a personal level, it's something I'd love to do, to be more involved in, and certainly at home, I've got a home automation system that intelligently controls my house, and importantly, insofar as this is concerned, I installed a pretty cool wall charger recently, the Garrow wall charger, which has fantastic API that hooks up into my home automation system. And when I have excess solar power production, I typically feed that into the vehicle. I'm trying to make it more intelligent, where it actually looks at my schedule for the week using integration into Outlook, and really helps manage the charging and making the most of excess solar power as a result of that. But yeah, that's more personal hobby. It's not a strategic direction for the company. I understand you guys are making strides in that space, and yeah, it's certainly something we very much support and love to see the traction you're getting there.
Yeah, that's what we focus on recently, because we decided, not it's not just me that's passionate of this topic in Happy Team, but the whole board.
Yeah,
So we decided to try and merge the passion with the work
yeah.
for the benefit of everyone involved, I guess. Um, so yeah, one more follow-up question on this automation that you mentioned. I thought that it's the Powerwall itself that can manage that to send to the car if there is excess
Yeah,
production,
look,
etc.
I think if you're in the Tesla ecosystem, it
Okay,
does do that, right?
okay,
Uh, but even then, I'm not sure if it's the current version of the Powerwall, etc. So it certainly, in my case, certainly doesn't do that.
yeah, that
But
makes
even
sense.
then, it's a bit more complicated, right? Because it depends how far you want to go. But in part, as I said, like the most basic is, do I have excess solar power? Let me route that to the car right now, this minute, right? So that's a very greedy or short-term approach, optimization approach. But there's a more planning oriented approach to this, which it will look at my schedule for the week.
Mm-hmm.
It will estimate the amount of kilometers I need to travel. It will look at my current battery level. Um, there's other discretionary loads in the house that might be high consumers. So even like from hot water heating through to the operation of the pool pump,
Yeah.
through to when we might choose to use the tumble dryer. So it would take some time, I think, for Tesla or any single OEM to provide a solution that's sufficiently holistic, because it needs to integrate into so many other data sources within and signals within the system.
Okay. And lastly, before we jump into the main topic of the call, I think a shout out is in order to Farzad Mesbahi, who's the guy that connected us. So we're no
Yes,
stranger to those discussions.
yeah,
Thanks to Farzad. So I'll also link
indeed.
to his
Yeah,
channel.
Farzad's great, and yeah, is been really amazing at creating a community, and yeah, that has, I think, many spin-offs. This being one of many examples, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the questions that I have here might take our time to discuss them today. Let's start with an
Sure.
easy one. What do you think must change in the electric cars to make them more affordable for the everyday for normal people, let's say, to replace the ICE cars at the price point that is most popular?
Mm. Um, Affordability. Okay. I think interest rates need to go down. That's a big issue in the US. So I think, yeah, there's obviously a lot of discussion and controversy around demand, and a lot of confusion, I think, or noise maybe in the market around demand of electric vehicles. Um, Uh, I haven't jumped deeply into the comparisons of traditional vehicles and electric vehicles, but certainly in the premium segment, Tesla's unequivocally a winner there, and um, that they're able to offer something very compelling at a significantly low cost, right? So, and their strategy has been very clear. And I'll explain why I'm starting off with Tesla in answering your discussion. Their strategy has been very clear that any technology initially is going to be very expensive. So they had the foresight at the start to develop a very sort of expensive supercar, so to speak, that was electric in order to make some headway to improve the technology. And then it was to expand to a more larger market, medium priced, and then a lower priced, even larger market. So that was the transition from the Roadster to the Model S and X, and then the Model 3, and now the next generation of vehicles that will be even more compellingly priced than the Model 3. And clearly that was a smart strategy, and I think it's a smart strategy for any new technology, because you want the early adopters who have a lot of disposable income and enthusiasm to help fund. It's a clever way of funding your knowledge, right? And to then find a path of iterating to improved cost reduction. So Tesla is certainly on a good path, and despite the controversy around them lowering prices, the point is they can afford to lower prices, and they can afford to lower prices because they've got particularly low unit costs, and clearly it's pitched as a price war, it's pitched as many things, but the real thing is affordability is an issue. Interest rates have increased fivefold or more. And so you're not trying to start a price war. You're trying to simply sell as many vehicles as you can, given your cost position. And if you've got a good cost position, you'll price accordingly based on the market. So I think the challenge is, and obviously we've seen that where the Model Y has been the best-selling vehicle worldwide for the certainly first quarter of this year, I think, maybe even first half of this year. And that's a combination of price and value. And it's still not a particularly low-cost vehicle. I think the challenge with the traditional OEMs is that they have not, it seems they have not explicitly architected a route of iteration fast enough across these product life cycles, right? And therefore that they're struggling with unit cost reduction. And sorry, the other important thing is ARK Invest talks a lot about this, where it's almost like there's, I mean, it's not quite a science, but it is a pseudoscience around what's known as Wright's law. And Wright's law talks about a proportional cost of reduction, a cost reduction in an industry as a function of, it's a version of Moore's law, as a function of the doubling of production volume, right? Yeah. So, and that certainly empirically seems to fit well, that if you double the production volume of a particular industry, the costs go down proportionately. And there's some fundamental logic and reasons behind that, right? In terms of capital efficiency, in terms of knowledge that's acquired, in terms of, it's almost, it's as strong as the Pareto principle, or as strong as Moore's law. So,
and there's also Tony Seba, who says that cost curves are like gravity. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Tony Seba's been, absolutely, banging that drum for many years, and certainly been proven right. And empirically, if you look at those empirical charts of cost reduction, it's like, they are so consistent, and it's like something weird has to happen for it not to continue along that line. And so I think the challenge with the OEMs, traditional OEMs, is they've been timidly following this electrification path, without question catalyzed by what Tesla has been doing and Tesla's valuation. I think many CEOs have outwardly admitted that they are responding to what Tesla has done, but they've been doing it sort of on a conservative basis as it is. And the problem now is with high interest rates and the dampening in vehicle demand. It's a case where they are becoming more timid and they are reducing investment, I think,
Yeah.
or at least slowing down investment. And it's going to create this vicious cycle where, as a result, they're not going to get the volumes needed. They're not going to progress the generational platforms, of vehicles, and it's going to lead to a cost disadvantage, right? And in turn, it's going to lead to less sales and a self-fulfilling prophecy of, electric vehicles aren't working, they're too expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And I've heard this dialogue within the traditional OEMs at different levels. But the ones who are bolder and are investing and are going down that cost curve will succeed. Now, obviously, so back to your question, what's needed? Yeah, ultimately, what's needed is ongoing investment and progression down that cost curve through iteration of generational platforms of vehicles. Tesla is clearly all in and doing that, as are Rivian and but even Lucid, but they are smaller players in the grander scheme of things. Regulations helping. So I think the IRA, which is, what is it? The Inflation Reduction Act, which is a terrible name for a bill that is actually about far more focused on sustainable energy sources and securing and transitions. It certainly helps, right? And I think that's been a good catalyst. But yeah, we need to see more investment. So I think we've had a bit of a slowdown because of the macroeconomic situation. And those who are pushing hard during this period are going to get an even bigger lead.
But I think it's pretty clear that it is just a slowdown. It's not a reversal or anything of that nature. It will
I
just be a
think that's
few
a good
years
point.
longer that will
Yeah,
take us to
yeah,
reach that
yeah,
point.
yeah. I think you're 100% right, and that's it. It is a slowdown, but I think during that slowdown, it will amplify the gaps or the differences between those who are more deliberate and those who are more conservative and unsure, right?
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to point out also, because you focused on the established OEMs, but the upstarts like Lucid, they also struggle, especially Lucid. They
Yeah,
seem like they're on fast track to bankruptcy or getting taken private by the Saudis. So it
yeah,
shows that they were just maybe not a few years, but possibly 10 plus years too late. And now they're trying to do what Tesla is doing, starting with a high-end car,
yeah,
but you already have Tesla.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
doesn't work that well.
I mean, it's an interesting one because Lucid, yeah. I mean, from what I've seen, it's a compelling offering, right? What they have, but the price point's very high, and they're very early on where Tesla was, right? In the okay, so they're either too late or like 2-3 years too early, because perhaps with an economic turnaround in 2-3 years, Lucid would be able to do what they need to do, but to try and ramp up a vehicle of such premium value during really poor economic times is unfortunate, right? I think, and maybe I don't know. I mean, it's one of these things where they obviously do have very strong Saudi backing, and in some respects, they've got a unlimited balance sheet, and that maybe gives them more options to. It forces them. It doesn't force them to be sufficiently innovative and to pivot to become to adapt to the current circumstances. Right? They can afford perhaps to lose whatever it is, $400,000 per vehicle or whatever the number is. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Okay, as a power user, and you've been using EVs for quite some time now, uh, and as you said, you also have some home setup
yeah.
that goes with it. What sort of software offerings do you see that are subpar in this space? And if you had the chance, what sort of software would you create to make
Yeah.
the whole experience
Okay.
better for EV users?
Okay. Wow. Hot topic that. Eh? Okay. So look, there's the in-vehicle software, and then there's the ecosystem, right, around that. Um, Maybe let's start with the in-vehicle software. So when I bought my i3, um, this was in 2014, actually. So look, the software internally was okay. It was based at the time. There wasn't the big central display, the touchscreen, etc., etc. It was fine. What was cool about it back then was the remote control through the app, the mobile app, and so I had the app. I could control climate control, um, unlock the car remotely, etc. back then, which was pretty cool, right? What was super frustrating, right, was the latency, right? Like literally 3-4 minutes between sending a signal and getting, and I kept like making a joke, right? Like it feels as if every time I request the climate control to be turned on, it's sending some signal to some SAP system in Germany that needs a purchase order approval or something for it to activate my climate control, right? Like literally in that time, I could probably spin up in those 4 minutes. I could spin up a Node.js service with Signal R or something that could respond quicker than what they had there, right? So that's and it's like here I am now, just recently having bought a Volvo XC40. I was which I love the car, right? I mean, again, we have limited choice in South Africa. Had I had a different choice, it would be a Tesla for sure. But I love the car. The drivability is amazing on that car, and the noise levels, the feel is good. But the software sucks, and it was such a disappointment because it's got Google Automotive in it. So Google Automotive is, just for those that may not know, it's not kind of Android Auto where you're using your Android on the screen. The sort of native operating system within the vehicle is the Google Automotive application, OS that's running. So I was quite excited about that, but it was a big disappointment, right? It's sluggish. It's just not refined. The features are limited, and so for the most part, I'm switching over, and I'm using Apple CarPlay because it just gives a better experience. And as much as we sort of get frustrated with Apple about moving slowly, they've delayed their equivalent of Google's automotive. I forget exactly what it's called, but their equivalent OS release. But perhaps they'll do a better job and provide a better release, right? And also, like some of the apps on, like I was so excited to with Google Automotive, there's a section that has all your audio apps, and one of them is Audible. So I'm like, cool, I'm going to download Audible. Yeah, like I don't know what they've done. They got an intern to write that app or something. Like when you log in, it sticks to one region. I think it's Germany or something. You can't. It's just unusable, right? It's just fundamentally unusable. But so, and just beyond those practicalities, it just doesn't feel good, right? It feels sluggish. It doesn't. It's like a whole bunch of disparate solutions put together that at best are good enough, whose sum of the parts create a really subpar experience, right?
And that's really
And
surprising, I must say, because I would expect that Google would put a significant effort and investment behind it now that it's
and
in
and
production cars.
and maybe they have, right? So maybe that is still true, but again, I think it's reflective of it's a non-trivial problem to solve simply because of the many moving parts, right? Different hardware, different hardware platforms, both now the processor potentially as well as the vehicle APIs. Working with OEMs is tough. So I think, I think it's reflective of when you've got so many distributed and disparate and varied components you have to deal with. It's hard to get right. And it's an example of why Apple generally perhaps has had a better user experience. Like it's not, the idea of consistent hardware and software being designed together is not just a marketing saying. There's a lot of merit to it, right? And clearly Tesla's in the same situation where they've in control of the hardware throughout the whole stack, and the software. And yeah, so that's disappointing. The in-car experience has been quite disappointing.
Interestingly, I'll add that I have the Volvo EX30 on order, and it's based on the new platform from
Yeah.
Geely. So we'll see if Android Automotive works better in the new platform. I'll report back, but it's
Well.
still a few months
Hopefully,
away.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully, they've refined things. And again, it just talks about what we spoke about earlier about iterations, right? And this was a transitionary, I think, case with Volvo, where they're sort of bringing in Google Automotive in an existing platform, whereas the EX30 that you have on order is more a from scratch design. So let's see. So hopefully, no doubt that there will be improvements. Hopefully, they are sufficient, right? So that is, yeah. So that's been a disappointment, to be honest. And again, also just being, even though I've never really owned a Tesla, I do drive them whenever I travel overseas. Every opportunity I have is to drive one. Is the over the air updates, which you do get with the Volvo, but they're quite disappointing, right? Like there is not anything to be excited about that comes through in the over the air updates. It's minor stuff,
No
right?
light shows.
No light shows, but yeah, like I mean, the most recent one you can disable the charger on the phone. So it's got a electromagnetic charger, that charging pad, which doesn't always work well. It overheats your phone, and they provide a feature where you can disable that, right? So that was the big update, right? Uh, so yeah, but nothing geolocation enabled, like folding in your mirrors, right? Fold my mirrors in when I'm at home, or but not when I'm, or vice versa. When I'm not at home, don't fold them in. When I lock the car, and those things are very doable, right? Like the car's aware of its location and so on.
Yeah.
But it will take some time for those things to happen.
Yes, it needs there needs to be a mindset change, right, in the people who are doing it, because they're not
Yeah,
used to thinking in
yeah,
that way to try and integrate
yeah,
those systems on in the car. They treat them
yeah,
as separate silos, I
yeah.
think.
I think exactly. So I think it's a mindset change, but I think the big thing, and this is what Tesla generally has got right, is there are too many silos, right? So it's like it doesn't matter what the idea is, to execute on that requires too many siloed organizations or parts of an organization to come together to achieve that, right? And in OEMs, it's internal parts of the organization as well as many suppliers, right, that need to come together, and and therefore executing on the concept is just fundamentally difficult. So I think, yeah, and that takes a long time to overcome, right? And then like it's also manifested in like the Volvo XC40 app is probably worse than the i3 one that I had, even though it's built today, and the
Yeah.
i3 was from 2014. It's worse in that it's also very sluggish. There's nothing really new. I can't control the climate, control temperature. If I turn it on remotely, I can't set a value to whether I want it. It just defaults to whatever it defaults to. Um, so so that is quite disappointing. I think the API, there's a new API now that is the Google API to control the vehicle. I think there's been some technical progress on that. So vis-a-vis their previous platform. I mean, again, I'm using an open source platform called Home Assistant, which integrates with a multitude of APIs and devices and so on. I briefly looked at the Python integration into the new platform, and it seems that at least that seems to be a more formal API for that to support third-party integration, right? So there's some headway there, and that therefore opens up the possibility to more intelligent services and ecosystems to plug in to this, right?
Yeah, that's good. Maybe this is the way. Just open it up and let people
Yeah.
provide some better software and better integrations.
Yeah. So that's as far as the experience is within the vehicle, right? Within the ecosystem. Yeah, look, I think you're going to. I'd be keen to hear your ideas as well on this because I haven't thought about the ecosystem that well. But on the converse of what we're saying, the charger that came with the Volvo is the Garrow charger. It's a Swedish, I think it's a Swedish manufactured charger. Um, and surprisingly, that has a pretty good API, right? And I was surprised at that. And um, again, within Home Assistant, there's a integration that built into the Garrow charger, and you can read a whole bunch of things: your charging rate, your amounts of energy used in the current charge. But importantly, you can also very quickly easily turn charging on and off and set the charging level, right? And it works. It's responsive. It's good. It doesn't look like that API is an afterthought, right? It's something that inherently works well. So that then opens up. So for example, initially I thought I would want to control when the car charges from through the vehicle's API, but that's still not possible, uh, as far as I can tell. But I could do all that through the car charger, through the wall charger, both when it charges and the level of charging. Because obviously, I want to balance my excess solar production
Mhm.
to my consumption or how much of that is channeled. So I need to control the amps or the power that the wall charger uses. So it works well. But clearly, like you can see, the example here is like you need to be quite technical and spend quite a lot of time to get it to work as you want it. And it's so far from being an out of the box solution that
Or at
manages your
least
energy
one that,
consumption.
or at least one that your electrician can set up for you. I don't even think there is enough knowledge in the industry to
Oh,
for
absolutely, yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
find
and
somebody
not
who can do it for
uh,
you.
yeah, absolutely, and again, like you speak of electricians, like as soon as I'll tell my electrician here, can you install this device? That they fine, but then I say, but it's an IoT device, and I want to control it through XYZ. Then there's like immediate panic, you know. So the transition between electricians and IoT control is that's a whole chasm. Um, so I had to work closely with my electrician. In this case, not to control the API, but it's I have a three-phase house system, and my solar power is running on one phase, and I want the charger to be able to switch from one phase to the other phase, so that I can make the most of my excess consumption in under certain circumstances. But other circumstances, if my solar power circuit's overloaded in terms of demand, I want to still be have the option of charging. At a very fast rate off the grid. So I need to shift the wall charger from one phase to another. And yeah, to find an electrician that can understand that problem, let alone help implement a solution was interesting.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
I've been
but
lucky
but
with with my electrician, because he's into those things as well, and we already discussed and agreed that when the summer comes, we will set up my charging so that will actually vary the rate of charge, so the power based on what is currently produced in the solar system.
very cool. That's very
So
cool.
and
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
possible
So
just
that's
matching the
quite
inverter with
unique.
the charger. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's quite unique in my experience having an electrician that is willing. Yeah, so Cuba, back to your question around software and ecosystem. Yeah, I mean it's not something I've given it an extensive amount of thought, but I mean I still have some other ideas. But I'm also interested to hear what your thoughts are, given that you've also given this obviously a lot of thought around your question around software in relation to electromobility and the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think that Tesla actually has its well thought out, and they're working on the ecosystem as well as the in-car stuff. If you have the whole ecosystem, like the Powerwall and their own charger, from what I've seen, then you can manage what you're trying to do on your own. And I actually think that if you have the in-car software sorted, and working as expected together with the app, there's not much more that an average user will need. It's only the power users then that will want to integrate it more with the home setup like you want to do it. And then another area is for the charging networks. I think there's a room for improvement for the charging networks and their mobile apps.
Yeah.
And possibly if the in-car routing software is crap, then you might need a better route planner on another app of that sort that will help you estimate the amount of charge that you have to top up to in order to reach your next destination.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, so
that's where I see the challenges apart from the in-car software.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. You see, in South Africa, obviously, adoption of electric vehicles is still extremely low, right? It's not a market where we're on the forefront of EV adoption. That said, and surprisingly, and this seems to be a weird trend in many countries, there's a reasonable amount of public EV chargers, right? It just blows my mind. Like, yeah, at this point, it feels like there's more EV chargers in South Africa than there are EVs type thing, right? And there are a few apps that expose those EV chargers. They are operated by a single network somehow, or integrated by a single network, which is surprisingly impressive in that you can charge on, it seems you can charge on pretty much any public EV charger and pay through one app, right? And that blows my mind how that's been achieved here on something that's just so, it's just not mainstream, but yet that's been achieved. Now that said, the quality of that app.
Question here: has this happened through some sort of government initiative, or is it all private enterprise?
No. It's grassroots. It's not government. It's commercially driven. Yeah. And then interestingly, the app that exists doesn't help you with planning, but it helps you with finding public charges, and the payment mechanism is quite interesting. That you can pay by tapping your card. So you create an account, single account through this app. You pay by tapping your card. You can also initiate the charging session through WhatsApp, actually. So you can send, the charger that you plugged in, you send a WhatsApp message, say I'm at this charger, initiates the charging session and charges you accordingly, or you can do it through the app itself. The app experience is pretty crappy, to be honest. Like it's like a what do you call those sort of web-based apps wrapped in an app? So it's not really a native app, right? So it's a bit sluggish, but it works. I mean, it's reliable. Let's put it that way. So although the user experience is not there, the reliability is, which is great. I'd rather have it that way around than the reverse. But yeah, in terms of route planning and so on, there's there's nothing that we really have here. I mean, obviously the advantage of Google Automotive for an EV car is that that's the big difference between, let's say, me using Apple CarPlay versus the native Google Automotive navigation, which is obviously Google Maps. My Google Maps navigation in Google Automotive has knowledge of my battery level in my vehicle, right? Yeah. Now that's cool. So if I pick a destination, then it will tell me, what the battery percentage will be when I arrive at the destination. Also, what it will be if I return to the same location when I initiate the route planning. It also does do so Google Maps. Therefore, it does also do route planning purely from the perspective of if I don't have enough range to get to my destination, it will forcibly route me through charging locations, right? But it's not something I've had to use hardly at all, though. So I can't really comment on that experience. But it didn't look particularly flexible, right? To be honest. But that's where I can see where Google Maps can become quite good in this particular use case at helping with routing, right? Possibly, yeah. So yeah, but certainly there's a lot to be said. I mean, I think I remember in the UK, even the Tesla routing experience was. When I was there and I'd hired a vehicle, there was still some use cases that weren't adequately catered for, right? So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of scope of creating a really good route planning solution.
Yeah, and actually owning a Tesla in Poland is also not optimal in terms of route planning because the inbuilt route planning in the Tesla that only considers Tesla chargers, and there are not enough of them. So
Yeah,
I just turn it off and tell it
yeah,
not to route me through superchargers because I
right,
need to plan it
exactly.
myself through
Yeah.
third-party networks.
I think that's one of the problems I think I had with the experience in the UK because I was in an area that didn't quite have enough superchargers, but also have they now enabled route planning on the app?
Yes. Yeah, you
Okay,
can do it at home. You can
okay,
pre-plan.
so you can pre-plan on the app. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, one last question for now, because I think there's only a few that we touched on, so I'll possibly invite you for another round
sure.
sometime in the future.
Yeah,
But
I'm still okay with time, so that's fine.
okay, um, exploring the differences between Europe and Africa,
Yeah.
what do you think has to happen for to increase adoption in South Africa specifically? Do you have maybe some local factories where global brands are building EVs, or do you think it's something that might accelerate it? Is it maybe the necessary step to accelerate it, or for example, do you think that Tesla will supply South Africa maybe from Mexico when they build it and ramp it up?
Yeah, so look, that's an interesting one. It's hard. Okay, I've got some thoughts, but it's certainly not an area that I'm an expert on. But I can offer some perspectives and comments, right? So South Africa, interestingly, historically, has been quite a significant player in automotive manufacturing, right? Many of the German OEMs, perhaps I'm not sure if Toyota and the like, have assembly plants and manufacturing plants here in South Africa, manufacturing right-hand drive vehicles and exporting those actually. So it's been in some aspects an export hub. I think BMW 3 Series, I think, is one anyway. So the so traditionally, the automotive industry here has been quite significant as a result of that. And the traditional OEMs have, had significant presence, manufacturing presence here. Now, unfortunately, that the direction that's been trending has not been good. It's kind of been on the decline, and with the presence of EVs, it seems even more so, right? Um, so it's not clear that the OEMs will invest in EV manufacturing. The traditional OEMs will invest in traditional manufacturing in South Africa, right? Um, yeah, that there aren't necessarily any obvious incentives for them to do that from a government perspective, and they themselves aren't, as we discussed earlier, pushing aren't aggressive on the expansion agenda of EV manufacturing. So that's one issue. The other issue here, with respect to your other point around coming from Mexico, we have, but because of the local manufacturing capability, we've got the industry's kind of been protected, and we've got import tariffs on the importing of vehicles, which significantly increases the price. The irony here is for electric vehicles, those import tariffs are even higher than for ICE vehicles, right? I don't know why. I mean, they fall into a different category, like a golf cart, or I don't know what, but it it's a few percentage points higher, so it makes a difference. So we kind of got the worst of both worlds at the moment, where we don't have the internal manufacturing capability or incentive on EVs, and we've got extremely high barriers, and therefore it compounds the slow adoption. Look, with the rest of Africa, it's different. Many of the other African companies are a bit more entrepreneurial and rational about adapting to positive changes. Um, but affordability is a big issue, right? So until we've got Tesla, who is likely going to be first, and obviously many other Chinese companies provide good, reliable, affordable, and when I say affordable, like very much on the lower end of the market, vehicles, adoption in Africa won't be, I think, very significant. When that does happen, though, then adoption will be significant, and I think, yeah, I think there will be some innovative solutions that might come out of Africa because there are advantages about having local charging and solar panel charging and so on in remote areas where supply chains to get diesel or petrol or to those areas is potentially a problem. And you can have EVs and electric bikes and all sorts of stuff and charge off solar. So I think there'll be innovation. And where we saw this historically in Africa is with the advent of cellular towers. In many places in Africa, the telecommunications, the cellular towers leapfrogged the adoption of landlines or phone landlines. I think when we have affordable electric vehicles, we're going to see some interesting dynamics within Africa. But yeah, until then, not much.
So the Chinese brands are not yet visible in South Africa?
Not that much, actually. No. Yeah, we're still waiting for the Haval to release. That's GWM to release the Aura. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are visible on the ICE side, but on the EV side, they're lagging behind. We've not seen much.
Okay, it's an interesting case that you approached the chicken and egg problem from a different end. So you have the charging infrastructure,
yeah,
and now you're ready for the cars.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and we've got the sunlight, So even within South Africa, we do have our national supplier. It's a state-owned supply of electricity. The entity that supplies electricity is called Eskom, and through a whole bunch of mismanagement and other regulatory issues, we have a shortfall in supply of electricity, right? And so the country undergoes what's called load shedding, which is targeted reduction in load by switching certain suburbs off on a rotational basis in order to manage supply and demand. So we do have a security of supply issue. And often people ask me, how do you charge your car with load shedding? But, I don't need to be charging all the time. That's the point, right? Like if load shedding is longer than 4 hours in any particular, I've got a bigger problem with my refrigerator than I have with my vehicle, right? I can, but my vehicle charging is not that time critical. So yeah.
Okay. And one last topic I wanted to touch on is an area where I think we can have the biggest impact of combining EVs and software, which is autonomous driving.
Yes.
And I know that you have some experience having used the full self-driving beta in the States.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about your experience, your expectations that you had before, and how they matched with reality?
Yeah, it's quite a strange experience because, I mean, obviously I've been, I love adopting new tech or trying new technologies and so on. It's just my personality. It has its pros and cons, and certainly testing full self-driving beta version, as you mentioned, has been something that I try and do whenever I visit the States. And
just to clarify for those that are not aware, it's the Tesla's software that they have currently enabled in the States and Canada, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The fully autonomous driving. So I've obviously been watching its evolution on YouTube. There's no shortage of people making videos of full self-driving beta videos, with both the good and the bad. So I think you get a pretty good feel for its capabilities and how those evolve. But it's a completely different thing to experience it, right? So the last time I experienced it was in December last year. It's certainly improved significantly since then, but even then it was in a pretty good state. And I think when you first try it, it's absolutely magical. Like the idea that I did this in New Jersey. I went from my brother-in-law's house to Target, a retail store, which is a 4 mile drive, 6 kilometers or more, 4.5 miles, 6 kilometers, with no interventions, right? Literally door to door. I did not do anything, and it just did it. And certainly for someone who's driving, like here we drive, we've got right-hand drive cars, there's left-hand drive. So driving on the other side of the road, in different road rules, etc. There's like an even if I did have to intervene, there's a fundamental utility that's quite profound, both in safety and experience and comfort in doing that, right? And that cannot be underestimated, right? And even just the visualization on the screen that shows the vehicle position within the lane um, is useful, because when you're driving, when you drive on one side of the road and then you have to drive on the other, generally what happens is you misposition yourself on the road because of where you're sitting in the vehicle, and you're too far to the left or too far to the right, depending which way around you've changed. And so that just helps you calibrate and get that right. But beyond that, yeah, as I said, the fact that it drove me for 4.5 miles with zero interventions is mind blowing, right? But the other interesting thing is it very quickly, your baseline of expectation adapts so quickly. Like you very quickly accept that as the norm and then start nitpicking on what it's not doing well, right? Which is very strange. It's very strange to see how quickly we accept something magical being expected and how our minds quickly move to the problems, right? Like I found that from a psychological perspective, like, yeah, that's been more profound for me than the full self-driving experience in itself.
Yeah, I remember Louis C.K. had a bit in his stand-up routine about it, about
Okay.
Wi-Fi on the plane when that was introduced, and
Yeah.
only a few seconds later, people were complaining that it's too slow.
Yeah.
He was
Exactly.
saying like, "Give it a second, it's coming through
Yeah.
space."
Yeah. That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but what do you think the progress will be on that? What's the timeline that you have in your head for adoption of a fully autonomous robotaxi
Yeah.
network, for example?
Look,
Because that's the
I'm
end
an
goal for Tesla, right?
yeah. I'm an optimist on these things. And I've already lost money on a bet where we had chosen some threshold of
Mm.
period. So I've lost some money on a bet on that. Clearly, it's a hard problem to solve. So it's really hard to say. As an optimist, and watching what Tesla's been doing, it feels like it's very close. What I would love to see, which I think Tesla's holding on to very tightly, is the number of interventions per mile of the Tesla fleet with FSD, and how that's been trending for the last 5 years.
Yeah, we know that it's
And
the main indicator that they follow, but they don't share it, unfortunately.
yeah, exactly. That's the one thing we just don't have visibility to. Um, and so I think without that, it's hard. It's hard to predict, and therefore I have to go with what Elon Musk says, with some discount factor, right? So it seems that it's going to be sometime next year. I mean, I do like the approach that Tesla's taken, which is a holistic approach. It's like we're going to solve full self-driving with vision. Does make sense to me, right? We've got an existence proof humans can drive with vision. When people talk to me about LiDAR and say, yeah, but what about LiDAR? It has all these advantages. Yeah, but it's also quite obvious that you still have to solve the vision problem, right? So, for example, like you're driving along in a street, there's something in front of you. It could be, and the LiDAR picks it up. It could be a paper bag, right?
Yeah.
Could be a paper bag that you can drive over. Could be a dog, which you shouldn't. Now, you can't tell which one of those it is with LiDAR necessarily, right? You need vision to solve the problem. You're driving on a road and you've got trees, and some of the leaves, the branches are long and they're hanging into the road, but you can drive through those, right? You don't have to stop because it's not a hard object. But LiDAR says, okay, there's an object there, stop, right? Even an interesting situation where we were involved in observing some automation of vehicles in the mining space, haul trucks that transport ore, and they would use LiDAR. And obviously, they're driving on dirt roads. And as the vehicle's driving, there were times where it'd have to slow down. But there's a dust cloud that follows the vehicle. And the dust cloud, if the vehicle slows down too much, eventually overtakes the vehicle and engulfs the vehicle. And at that point, the LiDAR system says, I can't see, I'm stopping, right? So so you have to solve the vision problem anyway. So it still makes sense to me that therefore the approach that Tesla has taken is cost effective and it just makes a lot of sense. So I'd say next year, right?
And recent advancements in machine learning also point us to a direction.
Oh yeah, it's insane, right?
Is correct with just taking video input out and giving output to steering the car directly.
Yeah, it's next year. Yeah, so that I take another bet on that, even though I lost the first one.
Yeah, it's not me that you'll take the bet on because I think we agree.
Yeah,
have to find somebody else. Yeah, it's actually.
I'm sure we'll find plenty of people who will be on the other side of that bet.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Andreas, for your time. I think that'll be enough for now because we don't want to also make this discussion too long. Or
sure.
Possibly join for another episode if you'll be interested. We can also do it in reverse if you want to also share it on your social media, for example.
Sure, that would be great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that'd be very cool.
Yeah, so that you also get some benefit out of it. I really thank you very much for accepting the invite.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you like those discussions, we might even think about just streaming them to YouTube directly, if it makes sense for any reason.
Yeah, if people are willing to listen to us, absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity, and good luck. I know you guys can add a lot of value in the space, and it's an emerging space. It requires people with holistic thinking, with integrative capabilities and ideas, and I hope you guys really make a very positive impact on the space because it's much needed.
Yeah, well, I think that it requires early adopters as well, people who get it. Because if you get software developers that never driven an electric car, they don't really understand what it is that they should be aiming for.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Just on a parting note, right? Often the most successful situations I've had in software development is not through the development of a fantastic spec that was handed over, functional spec that was handed over to developers, right? I got developers to become the end users, right? And got them in the front line, whether it was point of sale system or whatever it was. And then developers are extremely good at solving the problem. They just need to understand the problem they're solving and have empathy for the end user, right? So once they've been there, they are the best people to solve the problem. So to your point, right? Yeah, it's people who have that experience firsthand.
Yeah, that's what we capitalize on. That's what we tell our clients, that this is where you wanted to be positioned with your software team.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Have a nice rest of the weekend.
You too, Cuba. Take care, man. Cheers. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.